Welcome everyone, my name is Alex Warren. This is Learn by Doing. Today we're getting started with Python. Before I proceed, I'd like to cover a few things about how I'm going to go about doing this, seeing this is the first video. I will be using CodeWars as the platform. As you're writing your code here in the solution window, you can test against the sample tests by hitting the test button down here, or as you can see, you can use Command Control quote. Once you've completed your solution to the point where the sample tests are all returning successfully in this output window, you can then submit an attempt using Command Control Enter, or of course hitting the attempt button with your mouse. Now, a quick little thing that I didn't learn until farther in using CodeWars is that you can switch between the instructions and output using Command Control I, which is pretty useful. That being said, let's go on with the problem. Now, for those of you who don't know anything about programming, this is your first experience learning anything about programming, just going to cover the concept of variables real quick. If you do understand variables pretty well and you want to move on, you can skip to the next section of this video. So, variables. In Python, and any other language for that matter, a variable you can think of as a box or a container that is storing some kind or type of information. And this box has a label so that you can refer to it later, you know which box you're talking about, which variable you're talking about. As an example, let's say you have a variable A, that's your label for it. So you've decided that, hey, I want a box to have this label on it, variable A, and I'm going to use the equal sign to store information in it. And let's just do numbers since that's simple. I want to store the number 3 in there, right? So in this one line, I've told Python, create a variable, label it variable A, and store specifically the number 3 in that variable, so that anytime I refer to it, it basically is a substitute for the number 3 going forward. Now the thing is, this isn't set in stone and permanent. You can change its value later on directly by reassigning it. So now variable A is equal to 6. Essentially, this line is overwritten by having this line right after it. But you can also manipulate values, which we won't cover in this video since it isn't relevant to the problem, but I'll be sure to be doing that in a subsequent video. That's numbers. You can create multiple variables with other numbers. But the other type of variable to be concerned with, at least for this problem, is strings, which is really just it's text, put in other words. And you indicate that you were talking about a text piece of information by putting quotes around it. And it could be single or double. It doesn't matter. It's treated the same way. We'll just go ahead with single for now. So this variable is storing the string or text information of ABC. And you can verify this using Python's print function. So any function, you refer to its name, then use the open close parentheses. Within them, you put what's called an argument, which is basically the input to the function. You're telling Python to print whatever is inside the parentheses. So I'd like it to print the contents of variable A, and then you can put as many variables in here, just separate them with commas, and it'll work. And that's how you can print variables in Python. So let's go ahead and run it. Command Control quote. And as you can see, it's printing the contents of each variable that you are passing to the print function. And so if I happen to change this, run it again, now it has 4. Change this. Let's say I want it to be the string 6, not the number, but just the text of the number 6. It'll go ahead and do that. Now, that's variables 101, and it's enough information to go ahead and solve the problem for now. So let's get rid of all this. And as far as solving problems, I'd like to introduce the way in which I solve problems, both professionally and for these practice problems on CodeWars. I like to use what's called test-driven development, and basically put, that is starting from the most basic functionality of your function, your code, and then step by step, by the smallest increments, adding and modifying code in order to get closer and closer to the solution, instead of just dumping all the code all at once and hoping it all works. Because most of the time when you just write code all at once and don't test it as you're adding and changing it, you're more likely to run into bugs and errors, and it's that much harder to fix after the fact. Whereas if you do small little increments that get closer and closer to the solution, it is a much more thorough and less error-prone way of getting to the solution, and you'll have far fewer headaches, trust me. So, test-driven development for this problem, we need a function that works from the very beginning, because if I try to run this now, there's an error. And that's because we have the beginning of the function definition up here. This is how it looks in Python, but there's no body to it. You've initiated the function definition, but haven't put anything in the body yet, so it doesn't work. Now, the simplest thing to do, if you don't have code yet, is you can put a pass keyword, and that just tells the code to ignore this function. Just, yeah, it's defined, but there's no body yet, so just pass, move along, and this code will work. So that's the first step of test-driven development. The code runs. It compiles properly without errors. Now, as you can see, it's not doing anything, so the value it's returning is none, or nothing. Nothing is being returned, and down here in the test, it's trying to compare the value that is returned from this function call to the string or text 67. And nothing is not equal to 67, obviously, so the test is not passing, even though the code is running. So the next increment is to actually return something. A function essentially ends when you call the return keyword, and then right after it, tell it what you would like it to return. We know that if we go to the instructions, we need to be returning or giving the output of a string. The simplest string is an empty one, which is just quotes with nothing inside them. It's returning something now instead of nothing, so let's try and run it. It still runs, which is the code has to run each step. You have to make sure that each modification you make, you get to code to run again before you can move on and make more adjustments to your solution. And so that's better than nothing. We have an empty string, which is the right type of output we want, but it's still not actually passing any tests. So now let's work on that. And given the simplicity of this problem, there really is only one more thing to do before we get to the final solution. And for those of you who haven't coded before, this part is really not going to be straightforward. It's not something that you could have figured out without any help or looking something up. It's just part of learning how to use a programming language. Most, if not all, programming languages, at least higher level ones like Python, Java, and so on, have specific functions that are designed to convert other types of variables into their string versions. So we have numbers being passed here. We're trying to return a string, and in Python, there's really only one function that converts any other type to a string, and that's str, short for string. And then in the parentheses of the function, you're just passing the value you want to be converted to a string, and it almost universally works in Python. This is what you would use. In other languages like Java, there are different functions for different variable types. Let's try it and see if it works. Cool. All green. That means all tests passed. And if you open this up, you can see all the test calls passed. The expected value matched. When you get to this point, it's time to actually attempt the final solution. So attempt here, or control or command enter. And yeah, all green for that too. So you have solved this particular problem. You can go ahead and submit it officially and earn your points. Since I've done this before, I won't be earning any more points. But that's the very beginning of learning how to use Python. If you learned something new today, please like the video. And if you'd like to learn more, please subscribe so that you can see when the next video comes out. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope to see you next time.